This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Seth and I have talked about this chapter 2 of The Shadow Rising, and it's long, and it's split into 3 distinct sections. So you got your Perrin Bubble of Evil, your Matt Bubble of Evil, and your Rand Bubble of Evil in that order. And we're thinking that because this is so long and there's probably going to be a lot to talk about, it would probably be best to separate it into 3 separate episodes. The one before this will probably be separated into 2. I think that was our intent.
Yes, definitely.
That's not out yet, but it will be when you're listening to this if you're audio-only people. Anyway, now that I did all that...
Are you saying that the episode before this already came out?
In the future.
In the future, the episode before this one already came out in the past. But it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, because we actually recorded that episode about 24 hours ago.
Well, those were both beasts. I mean, part 1 was 2 hours. Part 2 was like an hour and 40.
Yeah.
So those are both gigantic.
Granted, it's like a 50-page chapter,
right.
So.
It should have been, in any of the book, it would have been the prologue.
Yes. But with that breakdown, you'll understand what I mean when I say Chapter 2, Whirlpools in the Pattern, and our symbol is the dragon. This is Part 1, Perrin's Bubble, with a long intro that doesn't necessarily have to do with Perrin.
Well, it's about, again, I think this should be Chapter 1. It should open with a wind arose.
There's another wind.
Yeah. I really do think that he should have made the previous chapter the prologue, because it's all a bunch of non-main characters. Yeah. I think he hadn't quite gotten into that sort of rhythm yet, where the non-main characters were in the prologue.
By the third book, he was like, we're not doing that. Or by the 5th book.
4th. We're on the 4th.
Yes.
Yeah,
by the 5th book, he was like, we're not doing that no prologue nonsense anymore. Inland, the hot night wind blew. North, across the vast delta called the Fingers of the Dragon. A winding maze of waterways broad and narrow, some choked with knife grass. Vast plains of reeds separated clusters of low islands, forested with spider-rooted trees seen nowhere else. Eventually, the delta gave way to its source, the River Aranin, the river's great width spotted with the lights of small boats lantern fishing. Boats and lights bobbed wildly, sudden and unexpected, and some older men muttered of evil things passing in the night. Young men laughed, but they hauled the nets more vigorously too, eager to be home and out of the dark. The stories said evil could not cross your threshold unless you invited it in. That was what the stories said. But out in the darkness... The last tang of salt had vanished by the time the wind reached the great city of Tyr. Hard by the river, where tile-roofed inns and shops shouldered against tall, towered palaces, gleaming in the moonlight. Yet no place was half so tall as the massive bulk, almost a mountain, that stretched from city's heart to water's edge. The Stone of Tyr, fortress of legend, the oldest stronghold of mankind, erected in the last days of the breaking of the world. While the nations and empires rose and fell, were replaced and fell anew, the stone stood. It was the rock on which armies had broken spears and swords and hearts for 3,000 years, and in all that time it had never fallen to invading arms, until now. The streets of the city, the taverns and inns were all but empty in the muggy darkness, people keeping cautiously within their own walls. Who held the stone was Lord of Tyr, city and nation. That was the way it had always been, and people of Tyr accepted it always. By daylight, they would cheer their new lord with enthusiasm as they had cheered the old. By night, they huddled together, shivering despite the heat when the wind howled across their rooftops like 1,000 keening mourners. Strange new hopes danced in their heads, hopes none in Tyr had dared for 100 generations, hopes mixed with fears as old as the breaking. The wind lashed the long white banner, catching the moon above the stone as if trying to rip it away. Along its length marched a sinuous figure like a legged serpent, golden-maned, like a lion, scaled in scarlet and gold, seemed to ride the wind, banner of prophecy, hoped for, and dreaded. Banner of the dragon reborn, harbinger of the world's salvation, and herald of a new breaking to come. As if outraged at such a defiance, the wind dashed itself against the hard walls of the stone. The dragon banner floated, unheeding in the night, awaiting greater storms. In a room more than halfway up the stone's southern face, Perrin sat on the chest at the foot of his canopied bed and watched the dark-haired young woman pacing up and down. There was a trace of wariness in his golden eyes. Usually, Fail bantered with him, maybe poked a little gentle fun at his deliberate ways. Tonight, she had not said 10 words since coming through the door. He could smell the rose petals that had been folded into her clothes after cleaning, and the scent that was just her. And in the hint of clean perspiration, he smelled nervousness. Fail almost never showed nerves. Wondering why she did now, set an itch between his shoulders that had nothing to do with the night's heat. Her narrow, divided skirts made a soft whisk, whisk, whisk with her strides.
That was a long wind-up to get to Perrin.
Yeah, I know, but there's just no way around it.
No.
That's the intro.
I really do feel like he could have summed that up in a smaller paragraph. The wind arose.
And then Perrin was there. But, I mean, it's beautiful. And the reasons that I wanted to read stuff in the beginning when we started this is that because it's beautiful.
And it's a scene setter.
Yeah, exactly. Even though this is a page and a half long scene setter.
A couple of things in there I wanted to talk about. The stories about evil not being able to cross the threshold.
Yeah.
Very vampiric.
Totally.
But do we know of any... I mean, there's no creature where that matters, right?
Nah.
That's just a story.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of think of the golem as the vampires, or I guess Drakkar really kind of are the vampires of the story.
Totally.
The flying, blood-sucking things. Although, the golem do suck all the blood out of people to survive. So they have a little bit of the vampiric, and the whole, like, stretching is very smoke-like.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to talk about is the hopes in the people's heads. Strange new hope. I mean, I know it's not Luke.
It's a strange new hope.
Oh, not just a new hope.
No.
Yeah. I'm kind of assuming it's dreams of conquest.
I guess, or like glory. I wasn't really sure what that all meant. And I mean, maybe we see this reflect a little bit when Matt's sitting with the sons of High Lords and gambling, and one in particular seems to be really excited. And he says something like, "We're going to march on Iliad next, and after that,
the world.
We'll conquer the world for the dragon." You tell him that, Matt, and he's like, "Oh, get the fuck out of here."
So I discovered something new. We'll get to it when we get to Matt's. Did you know every single one of those nobles, except one, ends up in the band?
I didn't realize that, no.
I looked them all up, and it was like, this is a noble in the band. This is a noble in the band. That entire group that he's playing cards with.
Oh, that's awesome.
Except one ends up getting killed before that happens.
Which one dies?
I wrote it down.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that in part 2.
When we get there.
I never noticed that. I didn't notice that either, Stormblast.
This bubble of evil is one of the first things that, like, starts them.
I remember, was it Raymond? He's around a bunch later. Estean?
No, he definitely is in the band.
Does?
Yeah, totally.
Oh.
There's only one who gets a minor mention, and apparently he dies in a battle at some point. He ends up with the rebels in Kyrian, and he's killed with the rebels.
Gotcha. So intro Perrin and annoyed Fail, and Perrin's thinking about how itchy his face is after not shaving for 2 weeks.
This is where Perrin goes from the beardless boy to the real man. But I do like that. I mean, he only grows the beard because Fail's like, you look pretty good with the beard. He's like, guess I'm not shaving.
Yeah.
And she's never asked him to grow the beard, but he wants to look good for his girl. I've talked about this, but like, how often you come home with like a haircut and your girl's like, oh, that was a good haircut. And you're like, nice, I'm going back to that lady.
Totally.
Or, like, that's where I'm getting my haircut. Or, oh, that's a nice shirt on you. All of a sudden it's your favorite shirt.
And they're like the only person you really care, like, who thinks what they think of how you look physically. You know?
Totally.
They seem to be sleeping together.
Yes, that would be my assumption. I mean, it's not explicit, and there is some indication that maybe they're waiting till marriage.
I choose not to believe that.
But I don't believe that.
What do you guys think? Are they are they sleeping in separate bedrooms now? And even if they are, that doesn't really mean much, does it?
There are definitely comments later that make it sound like they're waiting, because she is very frustrated that they are waiting. So my assumption is that
who are these teenage boys? Like, the more I read this, I'm just like, I can't understand.
Right. My assumption is that they're everything but at this point.
Everything but
intercourse.
Oh.
It's tough. I mean, it is so vague. There's no place where it's said right straight out. But I think there might be a reason that she goes to, when they're back in the Two Rivers, she goes to the elders and is like, so I may have mentioned that we've known each other for a year, and since we've been traveling together, we can get married tonight.
Let's get it going, women's circle.
And the women's circle is like, yeah, lady, you need to... We'll get you married right away. Anyway, we can certainly say at baseline, they are kissing each other quite a bit. Because here at the end of the scene, he tries to distract her with a kiss. So there's some real physical intimacy going on.
Yes.
How intimate that intimacy is, I'll let you come to your own conclusions.
And the only thing before reading a little paragraph that's just about the Stone of Tyr that I have here is that Fail tells him that her father is the biggest fur trader in Saldea, so she claimed. But it's true, right? Because he's the high up in the royal family. Wait, her father is the uncle of the queen?
Yes.
Of Saldea, I believe?
Yes. Also, I'd like to know some Saldean farm girls.
They sound fun.
They sound a lot of fun. But I think that might be, in all honesty, a little bit of Fail's noble upbringing and not having any actual experience with farm girls, just knowing the stereotype of farm girls. She's a noblewoman. What the hell does she know about farm girls in Saldea?
Probably not very
Probably
much.
not a lot. I did notice, so there's a whole conversation between Fail and Perrin about his status.
Yes.
And I kind of wanted to note that Perrin is now the best friend of the Dragon Reborn, the ruler of Tyr.
Right.
Status matters, not just in terms of like, oh, I need to be important because I need to be important, but like for safety, for money, for the things he needs to be able to do as the friend of Perrin, he needs to claim that as the friend of Rand, the Dragon Reborn.
Absolutely.
He needs to claim that status. And this isn't Fail being like, oh my god, I wish you had richer rooms because they need to be nicer. It's like, dude, you need to claim the status that you're due, or else you're going to get stepped on.
Yeah, you have to take it.
And so she's really vital for Perrin as this like political behind-the-scenes force that pushes him into taking the power that he needs to take to accomplish the goals and stay alive.
We see that happen with pretty much all the boys, where they don't seem to understand this status thing very well, right? Whereas Fail does, but her whole life is based around like understanding power and how to use it and how not to lose it. Whereas Perrin's like, well, I don't need 9 rooms to sleep in. He's like, it's a bedroom, you know?
She's, it's not about your need to sleep.
Yeah, this isn't about sleep. It's about real estate.
Exactly.
Yeah, the most powerful fortress in the land.
It's about respect from the people around you.
Yeah.
And power to get them to do the things that you want them to do.
People won't know who you are if you're not staying in the appropriate room. I thought it was fun that, while we're in Perrin's head for a moment before Fail starts talking about, or before he starts thinking about Fail's reactions to his choice of rooms, he talks about the Magir, which is like a kind of a concept that we hear about a lot, where like a giant fortress or castle or whatever, it's like domestic staff is headed by a single person, right? And it's usually seems to be a woman.
Who's often very powerful. I mean,
he mentions that like the amount of servants that are under her control are more than the armies that defend the stone. There are more people, right, that under her command than under the High Lords.
Honor your roof mistress.
Yeah.
Mistress Alvier.
Might be nice that the High Lords aren't killing you, but she's feeding you.
And like, if you piss off the people who are don't piss off the servants.
Yeah, dude. Terrible idea. They guard you while you sleep.
I always think back to Fight Club. When they put the rubber band around the guy's balls.
We guard you while you sleep.
Don't
fuck with us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Rand even says that a couple of times of like, I don't want to piss her off because otherwise things like start moving slowly. And like all of a sudden I don't get my privacy or clothes cleaned or Like, there's so many important things that happen on a day-to-day basis in a palace like that. I'm just curious about the word Magir. Any idea where that comes from? Is that a non-Wheel of Time word that exists outside of the book, or is it specifically made up?
Looks made up. However, Masha Ray seems to be a Bengali phrase, so I don't know if that actually means something, but Fail gives him that little lecture, like you're friends with the Dragon Reborn, or you're friends with the Lord Dragon, and Perrin's like, he's Rand.
It's just Rand. Yeah. It's just my idiot friend. I remember hearing a quote from someone slightly older than me saying, life gets really scary when you look around and realize all your idiot high school classmates are in charge of the world.
Yeah. It is kind of terrifying.
And I feel like that's Perrin's experience right now is like, oh my God, Rand's in charge of things?
Of the world?
What?
This is a terrible idea.
Oh, it's just Rand. He's not the Lord Dragon. He's just my idiot friend Rand, who steals pies and gets smacked by Nynaeve.
Yeah.
Or as Matt says, he's a good friend unless he's being all serious and responsible. The next thing I want to talk about is Fael's basically like, well, I'm going to leave unless you have a reason not for me to leave. And he's like, you want me to say something? And she's like, yeah, I want you to say something. Are you kidding me?
I was just staring at that and wondering how to approach it.
So this is the beginning of certainly not the beginning, but a continuation of the conflict relationship between the two of them, where Fael wants Perrin to act a certain way according to her culture. And it's very opposite of the way he is used to acting.
Yes.
And also just I think this is more of general miscommunications between two people who love each other.
And they are two teenagers, or just after, I guess Perrin's 20, but...
Yeah.
I don't know how good I was doing at relationship communication when I was 20 years old. Bad is the answer.
Badly, yes. I can tell you exactly how good I was at relationship communication when I was 20. Awful. Just awful. And, I didn't even know what I wanted well enough to verbalize it.
That is also a thing that you learn about a lot about yourself in your 20s. Well, I guess in my experience anyway, and,
Yeah, what do you want me to say? That I want you to stay? Yeah, that's exactly what she wants you to say. Say it. Even if you know she can't, even if you want to keep her out of danger, you have to at least acknowledge that that's what you want.
To his credit, he does say it. However, with a qualifier.
Mm-hmm.
I do want you to stay, Fael, but maybe you should leave. I know you're no coward, but the Dragon Reborn, the Forsaken, and he trails off. And, that's also fair. And Fael is also not being good at communication either. She's also not doing this well.
No, neither one of them are.
Because his fears are legitimate. Like, listen, I'd really like it if you stay, but any room that I'm in could explode at any moment just because I'm in it, and that doesn't make me particularly comfortable.
Or, for example, this axe could come to life and try and kill you.
Right.
Yeah. That's weird.
In a moment.
Yeah.
Might happen.
And so he wants to protect her, and she's like, screw that. I don't need protection. I just want to be with you. And so there's this inherent, she loves him, and she wants to be with him. He loves her, so she wants her to go away for her own protection.
Yeah, how very Rand of him.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, but at the same time,
kind of legit? It was kind of amused when Perrin protests. Rand isn't Luth's Theron Kinslayer. He won't be the one to kill us. Not. Right.
Yeah.
Of course they don't know what they're talking about, but I just figured I'd throw it out there.
Well, and that takes me back to Veins of Gold. That puts me forward to Veins of Gold when Rand talks about, being raised by Tam made the difference for him. He's the same person, but this time he had a chance to be raised by a good man, and that made him different. Also, he's not actually ever he overcomes the insanity.
Yeah, I mean, it does make him pretty great.
Next thing I have is the relationship between Bane and Chiad and Fael.
I've been talking to Bane and Chiad, Perrin. That was no surprise. She spent considerable time with the Aiel women. The friendship made some trouble for her, but she seemed to like the Aiel women as much as she despised the Stone's Terran noblewoman.
And she ends up, starting Cha Fael and taking control of them. There's a pretty tight relationship between Fael and the Aiel women, which is to say they're all fairly savage women. I think at one point, again, I was listening ahead, and Perrin said, Bane, Chiad, and Fail sit down at Mistress Luhan's table, and he's like, he was amazed he got all of those fierce women, and he was including Fail in that.
Yeah.
To like sit down and calmly hold some tea. Those three very savage women and dainty little teacups.
She accuses him of being afraid of Moraine and says, like, we know that she can't watch us, like we could just leave together.
She can't channel it on anything she can't see.
He's like, that's not the point. I don't want to leave, and I don't think I could if I wanted to. Even if I did want to, I don't think it would be possible. And props to him for kind of getting this little Taveran thing worked out. This was the part that we're kind of walking into now.
And I think that's the only reason he is eventually able to leave and get back to the Two Rivers, is he understands that there's something holding him back, and he has to really fight to overcome it, to get away from Rand.
I think I am part of Rand's destiny somehow. Matt, too. I think he can't do what he has to do unless we do our part as well. That is the duty. How can I walk away if it might mean Rand will fail?
So you're saying Perrin embraces his destiny and thereby controls it, whereas Matt tends to fight it, and the fight is how he controls his destiny. You might even say like a Sidar Sidine, two halves of Taveranness.
I suppose you could say that, but I don't know that I would really say Matt fights it as much as dislikes it. He dislikes that he has to do these things. He complains about it. He does not appreciate the fact that he's been caught in this, like all these crazy events. But whereas for Matt, this is like some mental gymnastics that he has to do all the time now, where it's like showing up to a job that you hate, but you don't have a choice, kind of. Except he does have a choice, and he consistently doesn't leave. Although Perrin kind of accepts it. And he's like, I don't think I could if I wanted to. So this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And also, in that when he says, like, how could I leave if it means that Rand might fail? If Rand fails, everyone dies. Time itself dies. So this is like kind of important. It's not like they're, I don't know, tilling a field together. And if Perrin leaves, like Rand has a bit more work to do. This is more than life and death. This is the life and death of reality.
This takes me back to the West Wing. There's a scene early on in season 1 where the vice president is having relationship troubles with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you never come home. You're at work all the time. You work 16 hours a day. Like, I want you to care about me in this relationship. And he's like, listen, for these 8 years, this presidency is more important. And she's like, it's not more important than our relationship. And he goes, yeah, it is. And then they end up getting divorced. So it's not like a good way to go. But it reminds me of that situation where, like, listen, I love you and I want to be with you, but right now the fate of the world is a little more important than our relationship.
Right. Like trying to ensure that we don't get nuked. Like, we're not going to have the ability to have a relationship if I fail in my job.
Exactly.
Is what parents...
The world will end.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like this book makes the point that even when you're saving the world, you need to spend the time to love people, because otherwise what's the point of saving the world?
Sure. Iron shatters, right? We'll get to that later.
Wendiar shatters.
Perrin goes on to say, I worked it out for myself. I think Taveran are pulled toward each other, and maybe Rand pulls us. Matt and me both. He's supposed to be the strongest Taveran since Arthur Hawkwing, maybe since the Breaking. Matt won't even admit he's a Taveran, but however he tries to get away, he always ends up drawn back to Rand.
I kind of picture it as a planet with a couple of moons. Like, obviously moons have gravity.
Sure.
And the planet has gravity.
And they all affect each other.
Yeah, but Rand's this big planet that Matt and Perrin are orbiting around.
Yes.
And they certainly pull Rand in return, but because he's such a bigger Taveran, they really more exist in his orbit than the other way around. But if you're actually, like, adjacent to Matt or Perrin, just like if you're on the moon, you're going to be stuck to the moon.
Sure.
Even though you're technically stuck to the moon that's orbiting the planet. I guess we could also go with sun and planets, if you want to say, like, Rand is the sun and Matt and Perrin are planets, and all the various people they pull into their orbit are moons.
Same analogy,
yeah. I kind of like Rand as the sun, though. He who comes with the dawn. Who comes with the dawn? The sun, every single morning.
I highlighted this part to read. And if you're reading along with us, you'll understand, but I think it kind of speaks for itself anyway. She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke it was in sympathetic tones. Poor Perrin. I left Saldea to find adventure, and now that I'm in the heart of one, the greatest since the breaking, all I want is to go somewhere else. You just want to be a blacksmith, and you're going to end up in the stories whether you want it or not. And I always thought that was just a compelling part of the concept of Ta'veren, that they don't really have choices.
They have fewer choices than most people.
Much fewer.
Mm-hmm. The pattern needs them to be something, and it will force them into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, like, you were talking about this before, but I forget exactly when it happens, but at some point Matt, like, packs up his shit, puts on his hat, and walks out of the stone, and then something happens. I can't remember what, but he thinks about it for chapters.
It's how he ends up with the Band of the Red Hand. He's like trying to flee battle and ends up in the middle of like a bunch of people. Bambi's saying he goes to Tom, and Tom's like, why don't you just, it's the middle of the night, let's play a game. Tomorrow morning will be fine.
Okay, yeah.
And Matt's like, yeah, you're right, tomorrow morning will be fine. And Tom's like, just that easy. Interesting. Like, Tom's basically fucking with Ta'veren at that point.
Yeah.
Like poking it to see what happens when he like just makes a vague suggestion, and it's just like the easiest thing in the world gets Matt off his goal of getting out of there.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to, are you leaving then? He asked. She stood up, brushing her skirt. For a long moment she kept silent, as if deciding on her answer. I do not know, she said finally. This is a fine mess you've put me in. Me? What did I do? And then she says, well, if you can't figure it out.
I'm not going to tell you.
Ugh.
That has to be the most frustrating phrase any man ever hears. But,
anyone.
Yeah. But what she's saying to him is, I like you, and I'm stuck in this situation because I like you. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm stuck in this. Like, if you don't know I like you, I'm not going to tell that to you. I believe the making out was enough of a communication that I like you, you know? Like, but it's this idea that, like, the women always blame the men for their attraction to them. I think,
and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, Fael does this. Not Fael. Min does this a lot, where she's like, "Ugh, why did Rand get me into this situation?
I hate that Rand getting me into this." Yeah.
And it's totally like he hasn't talked to her in a year. You know? It's like she just thinks that it will help him, and so does the thing she thinks is going to help him because she's loyal and dedicated and loves him.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the axe and the hammer.
Sure.
I was just thinking about the parallels between the Aiel choosing a spear over a sword because of the way of the leaf, and Perrin choosing the hammer over the axe, again, kind of because of the way of the leaf.
Sort of.
That one is a tool.
Right.
The spear and the hammer are tools, but the sword and the axe are only for killing.
Same idea.
And so you have this just incredible parallel between, Perrin struggling with what is essentially the way of the leaf.
And a weapon as a symbol rather than a functional tool.
Exactly.
For killing. You know what I mean?
Right. And when we see in Rand's visions, when the Aiel make the choice to pick up the spear as a weapon, they use it because it can be a tool for catching game.
Yeah.
Not just for killing. Whereas the sword,
for killing people.
I don't think anyone ever takes out a deer with a sword.
No.
And the whole fact that, like, Perrin absorbs the way of the leaf through the Tinkers, which are an offshoot of the Aiel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Gen Aiel versus the True. Anyway. And then the whole parallel between the Aiel respecting blacksmiths because they create stuff, and Perrin being a blacksmith even though he's a warrior. The whole thing, the Aiel-Perrin connection is something I don't think about a lot because we think of Rand and Aiel as very closely related. But in a lot of ways, Tinkers being an offshoot of the Aiel and Perrin absorbing that culture from the Tinkers really brings it together for me.
Do you think the Tinkers had that big of an effect on him?
On Perrin?
Yeah.
I think they have a huge effect on Perrin. Yeah. Huge effect. That's without even bringing Aram into the scene. And that whole thing.
Later, but up until this point.
You have in Perrin a natural predator because he's the wolf.
Right.
But he's also someone who craves peace and stability and a simple life.
He does kind of identify with them.
And he sees that in the Tinkers, and he envies the Tinkers, their ability to live a simple life.
Oh, yeah, the Tinker Woman who dies in the mountains. I forgot about that.
Perrin is thrown up against the Tinkers over and over and over again. And then the whole situation where he offers them sanctuary and they don't take it, and then they're all a lot of them are killed by the Trollocs.
Yeah.
He fails to protect the Tinkers over and over and over again.
He gets really angry about it.
Yeah. That's something that I'll probably bring up again repeatedly as we get more into his debate over Axe and Hammer.
For sure.
But I think the parallels between Aiel abandoning the Way and the Leaf for the spear is very interesting.
Now I have 2 pages to read. The action scene.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't highlight anything there. Why not? And I was like, oh, because you're going to read it all.
So they're having their argument. They're in their room.
Just one thing. He talks about a fish trying to understand a bird.
Yes.
Which is very much a fish trying to teach a bird how to fly.
Yeah.
Channeling. There's that
Moraine's,
fish bird. The gender dimorphism.
Analogy.
Yeah. Or which one's fish and which one's birds?
I don't remember what Perrin says first, but Perrin seems to think that he's the fish.
He did feel like a fish. Well, Fail, of course, is the bird.
Makes sense. I don't remember Moraine's original analogy, but she uses...
Is it like a bird trying to... A female channeler teaching a male channeler is like a blank trying to teach a blank how to fly?
Yes.
So I think it's a falcon teaching a fish how to fly. So I think that it's the same. The bird is the female, and the fish is the male. That's totally unimportant.
I don't think it really means anything. No. So they're in the room having their argument. Perrin is quiet for a minute, and outside in the darkness, a cock crowed. Aiel shivered and hugged herself. My nurse used to say that meant death is coming. Not that I believe it, of course. He opened his mouth to agree it was foolishness, though he shivered too. But his head whipped around at a grating sound, and a thump. The axe had toppled to the floor. He only had time to frown, wondering what could have made it fall, when it shifted again, untouched, then leapt straight for him. He swung the hammer without thought. Metal ringing on metal drowned Fail's scream. The axe flew across the room, bounced off the far wall, and darted back at him, blade first. He thought every hair on his body was trying to stand on end. As the axe sped by her, Fail lunged forward and grabbed the haft with both hands. It twisted in her grip, slashing toward her wide-eyed face. Barely in time, Perrin leapt up, dropping the hammer to seize the axe, just keeping the half-moon blade from her flesh. He thought he would die if the axe, his axe, harmed her. He jerked it away from her so hard that the heavy spike nearly stabbed him in the chest. It would have been a fair trade, to stop the axe from hurting her, but with a sinking feeling, he began to think it might not be possible. The weapon thrashed like a thing alive, a thing with malevolent will. It wanted Perrin. He knew that as if it had shouted at him, but it fought with cunning. When he pulled the axe away from Fail, it used its own movement to hack at him. When he forced it from himself, it tried to reach her, as if it knew that would make him stop pushing. No matter how hard he held the haft, it spun in his hands, threatening with spike or curved blade. Already, his hands ached from the effort, and his thick arms strained, muscles tight. Sweat rolled down his face. He was not sure how much longer it would be before the axe fought free of his grip. This was all madness, pure madness, with no time to think. "Get out," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Get out of the room, Fail." Her face was bloodless pale, but she shook her head and wrestled with the axe. "No, I will not leave you. It will kill both of us." She shook her head, growling in his throat. He let go of the axe with one hand. His arm quivered with holding the thing one-handed. The twisting haft burned his palm and thrust Fail away. She yelped as he wrestled her to the door. Ignoring her shouts and her fists pounding at him, he held her against the wall with a shoulder until he could pull the door open and shove her out into the hallway. Slamming the door behind her, he put his back against it, sliding the latch home with his hip as he seized the axe with both his hands again. The heavy blade, gleaming and sharp, trembled within inches of his face. Laboriously, he pushed it out to arm's length. Fail's muted shouts penetrated the thick door, and he could feel her beating on it, but he was barely conscious of her. His yellow eyes seemed to shine, as if they reflected every scrap of light in the room. "Just you and me now," he snarled at the axe. "Blood and ashes, how I hate you." Inside, A part of him came close to hysterical laughter. Rand is the one who's supposed to go mad, and here I am talking to an axe. Rand, burn him. Teeth bared with effort, he forced the axe back a full step from the door. The weapon vibrated, fighting to reach his flesh. He could almost taste its thirst for blood. With a roar, he suddenly pulled the curved blade toward him, threw himself back. Had the axe truly been alive, he was sure he would have heard a cry of triumph as it flashed toward his head. At the very last instant, he twisted, driving the axe past himself. With a heavy thunk, the blade buried itself in the door. He felt the life, he could not think of what else to call it, go out of the imprisoned weapon. Slowly, he took his hands away. The axe stayed where it was. Only steel and wood again. The door seemed a good place to leave it for now, though. He wiped sweat from his face, with a shaking hand. Madness. Madness walks wherever Rand is. Abruptly, he realized he could no longer hear Fail's shouts, or her pounding. Throwing back the latch, he hastily pulled the door open. A gleaming arc of steel stuck through the thick wood on the outside, shining in the light of wide-spaced lamps along the tapestry-hung hallway. Fail stood there, hands raised, frozen in the act of beating on the door. Eyes wide and wondering, she touched the tip of her nose. "Another inch," she said faintly.
And it would have gone right through her skull. I think what we have here, I don't know. She wants to help him, and he's refusing the help.
This is the same as the argument they were having before about her staying or not staying in the stone, or staying or not staying near him. This is like a literal, smaller version. Like, look, this is what I was fucking talking about, lady.
And he's literally physically forcing her out of the room, even though she wants to stay.
Yeah.
And is trying to stay.
I'm going to skip ahead a bit. I wanted to read like one more paragraph, because it's funny. "Are you hurt? Are you injured?" Fail's asking. "I'm all right," he told her. "But are you? I didn't mean to frighten you." She peered up at him. "Truly? You are not hurt in any way. Completely unhurt. Her full-arm slap made his head ring like a hammer on an anvil. "You great, hairy lummox. I thought you were dead. I was afraid it had killed you. I thought..." She cut off as he caught her second slap in mid-swing. "Please don't do that again," he said quietly.
I have a bunch of issues with these scenes that are hard to talk about. Not necessarily hard to talk about, but like...
What do you mean?
I think they would do better if they'd worked together than if he'd like forced her out. Like if he had acknowledged her and been like, "All right, I'm going to have it go for you," and then you dodge out of the way and it'll end up in the door. Like, rather than doing it himself, I feel like they could have worked together in a way that was a little more smooth. And then the fact that she smacks him, I'm not super happy about either.
Well, she's angry. I mean, he did throw her through a doorway. This seems fair. But
it was an open door. It's not like he put her through a closed... You made that sound like he put her through a closed door. He just pushed her out of the room and then shut the door on her.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of, like, the violence. Even though, like, in some ways our heroes are kind of invulnerable, and so, like, a small slap is not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, he is giant.
Yeah.
And, like, the next line, she's trying to pull her hand out of his because he's holding it so she doesn't hit him again, and she can't move.
And it's just nothing. Yeah. The difference in strength is huge.
He's a giant.
Right. But that doesn't mean he doesn't want to get slapped.
Well, of course.
Yeah. It's just they have this very contentious relationship, and sometimes that rolls over into a physical contentious relationship, and I'm sort of not okay with it.
Maybe they'll work that out in the future and it'll be consensual. Leaving it there.
Yeah. But I actually like what Bambi says, that she's shaken and she's expressing it, but it's actually her worry for him.
Yeah.
It's like she's smacking him because he made her worried about him, that he was dead. Not that he necessarily forced her out, or that it was like, I was worried about you and I couldn't help you when you forced me out of this. If we want to go with the analogy, you forced me out of this situation, out of this relationship, and you're preventing me from helping you.
Yeah.
On a big scale. And that's unacceptable.
Ferengi says he hurt her pride. And I think that's really accurate as well.
Well, and like she said, and her desire to be his partner. And I think that's like, I want to be an equal partner in this relationship, and you just took over. And you could have been hurt. They start to accomplish quite a bit more when they start working together. as opposed to trying to work independently to protect the other person.
That'll take a while.
That takes a long time.
That's what I'm referring to, Bambi. The ways, oh God, the ways. So frustrating.
Yeah, she's trying to prove a point.
Yeah. Well, they're just going to have to work out their power dynamics.
And I will say, like, the whole thing with the ways, it's frustrating, yes. Perrin's being a dick to Fail to try and drive her off so she doesn't see him killed.
Right.
And she's being a dick to him in response to that. That there is a reason why they're being a dick to each other. It's not just because
they're fucked up power dynamics,
yeah,
that they don't have any adult way of understanding their own emotions, or.
But I mean, Perrin is really treating her like she has no idea why he's being an asshole to her. She doesn't understand that he's going to go turn himself over to the White Cloaks. And her attitude changes 180 degrees when she realizes that's the reason he was trying to drive her off.
But somewhere around here, Perrin says, like, listen, the reason I don't want you to come is because I don't want you to see my execution. This is the only way I'm going to be able to stop this.
That's like when they're she doesn't realize that until they're in the Two Rivers.
I can't keep track of what happens where sometimes. Yeah, and Perrin insisting that if you had stayed, we'd both be dead, which is speculation at best, Perrin.
Also, Perrin's a little confused because he essentially says the same thing twice, once in a very, like, mealy mouth, like, oh, if you'd stayed, it would have been a problem. And then the second time where he's like, bitch, if you stayed, it would have been a problem. And, like, she responds to the second one.
Yes.
And he's very confused, but it's very much a cultural thing where she responds to a forceful assertion of dominance and this, like, sort of whiny, like, oh, I didn't want you to get hurt, like, isn't good enough for her.
She likes watching him demonstrate his power.
Exactly.
But not against her.
I don't think that's true at all. I think she enjoys when he demonstrates his power against her. That she wants someone who can stand up to her.
Yeah.
Someone she can respect. Someone who's...
Not when it demeans her, Leia's saying. That's a better way. That's what I was going for.
She wants to be treated as an equal, and when he doesn't treat her as an equal, she gets pissy, which is kind of understandable.
Yeah.
I also love that she keeps calling him a hairy ox after asking him to grow out his beard.
Just simultaneously being like, hey, get hairier, you hairy ox.
Exactly.
Is this turning into a pet name?
My falcon, my hairy ox.
Oh, okay.
Well, all right.
Well, whatever you're into.
So Perrin runs off thinking that this was one of Rand's. Like, remember when they were in the mountains and Rand shook the whole mountain and, like, Leia got her head cut and blood ran down her face.
Yeah, was that her name?
That was the Tinker Woman. Yeah, it was Leia. I think he's assuming this is a similar, like, one of Rand's uncontrolled power surges where he doesn't really know what he's doing. That he's not trying to kill him, but he may have actually accidentally caused this axe to come to life.
Fail and Perrin thinks that this is caused directly by Rand, which is...
I mean, there's no way that this is caused by channeling. Like, there is no way to channel an axe to life. It's just not something you can do with the one power.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
And so, you know, it's very obvious to me that this is, well, now, that this is a bubble of evil. That, like, basically whenever something happens that's, the power is so weird, like, it can do things, but it can only do things that are possible. Bubbles of evil do things that are not possible. Does that make sense?
Not really. I understand what you mean, but, you know.
I guess what I'm saying is there's a framework. Like, you have the one power, you do the weaves, it's always additive magic. Right.
They work within a framework, and giving an inanimate object a mind is not that framework.
No, not in the slightest. And neither is, like, making lava spew up from inside of somebody. Like, you just can't do that with the power.
You have to get the lava from somewhere, yeah.
You can cause them to burst into flames.
No Sorcerer's Apprentice stuff, Jesus Fringy says.
There's no inanimate objects can't have minds. Reflections can't have minds. Cards can't have minds. That's not something you can create with the one power. But clearly, a bubble of evil does all three.
Yes. And Perrin and Fail think that this must have been, I don't want to say caused by Rand, because I could debate that it is caused by Rand, but not directly by him. He didn't do a thing that did this.
I think like this is caused by Perrin being Ta'Veren and attracting the bubble.
Sure, when, you know, possibly having the three of them together.
Although, yeah, I was gonna say having all three of them might be it's like a deeper
Draw.
well for those bubbles.
Draw more bubbles into one place at one time, And I
So
don't know
we're in.
where Perrin is exactly, but Matt mentions that Rand is 100 feet above his head, like at that moment.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's like on a different floor of the stone.
And parents in the stone.
And they all hear the cock crow before this happens, which I feel like is cute, or like a cute, fun way to be like, this is the same moment in each chapter. But it also means that, like, how far can you hear a cock crow from? 100 yards? They're all in the same little space.
Is it the same cock each time? Is it even a real cock?
I think so. The more I think about it, the more it doesn't really make sense that there's a cock crowing in a fortress. Wait, everyone's saying yes, it's not a real rooster?
I disagree. I think it is a real rooster. They can fly, too. I can just imagine it perching on some, like, random outcropping. And
I assumed it was a real rooster, which
Yeah.
was, like, my argument for, like, they're all within a really small space of each other. I know an actual cock crowing is really loud, and you can hear it from hundreds of yards, probably.
Yeah, but in a city, there's a lot of noises, and that it doesn't carry that far.
Yeah.
But they're all in the same palace within a similar area.
Inside of a giant rock, so
Yeah.
I'd say that they're all probably, abutted on the same courtyard or something, even though Rand is up high and Matt is down low.
And this is pretty late at night, too, so there may not be a whole lot of ambient noise, right? Matt's up late gambling, Rand's in his chambers where Baerlon shows up, and, I wonder what Perrin and Fael are doing together.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the middle of the night.
But that's, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's one of my headcanon things, but, like, come on. What do boys and girls do when they hang around in rooms late at night together, alone?
No, Aradia, I agree with you that there is definitely a quote later on that's...
What? That they haven't had sex?
Yeah. That makes it sound like they haven't had sex. But my headcanon is that they totally are. I just believe that they are.
That's a good question, Ogier. And my first instinct is to just answer the question with a question. Is the Dark One evil?
Yes.
Yeah? What's evil?
The Dark One is the evil in men's hearts.
I feel like he's the opposite of is. He's like not evil. Evil is like something a person does. He's more like a force.
But he's the force that arises when people make evil decisions. Yes, he's the result of people's evil decisions.
Tio is favored by evil people. Is it the force against balance? So chaos? Chaos and destruction?
But just like in alignment charts, you can have chaotic good or chaotic evil.
Yeah, that's fair. And, in the same way that I wouldn't say humanity is good, it's about what you do with your time as a human and the culture that you live in, which defines how we decide what good and evil is or what that means.
I mean, don't get me wrong, let the Lord of Chaos rule is definitely what the Dark One's all about.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of chaos in him.
Really, I feel like preservation and ruin is more clear-cut than
Yeah.
the Creator and the Dark One.
And in a lot of ways, I think Rand might be the Lord of Chaos.
Yes, it's a good analogy.
And so, it's hard to say that the Dark One is chaos, because in some ways, I think Rand is the Lord of Chaos.
In a way, yeah. This is deep and philosophical, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really want to get more into it.
I would say Rand post Veins of Gold is balance. Pre Veins of Gold, he is the Lord of Chaos.
Sure. And chaos isn't necessarily a bad thing either. Like the analogy that I use all the time, like a hurricane is chaos and destruction. Is it evil? I don't know. It's wind and heat and
I would
movement.
disagree with you that a hurricane is chaos. A hurricane is incredibly well ordered.
Then why can't
It's
it
got
be?
a ton of structure to it.
I guess.
You've got the eye wall, you've got the spinning,
Then what's chaos?
unpredictability.
So then the Dark One is definitely not chaos.
I don't think the Dark One's chaos at all. I think
Dark
that's
One's
I was
highly
saying
predictable.
He's evil. I honestly think on the alignment chart, the Dark One is lawful evil. And I think Rand is chaotic good. At least in the beginning, pre-Veins of Gold. After Veins of Gold, he's lawful good.
It's really hard to make any sense out of it, but to me it just doesn't seem very black and white.
And it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm definitely talking in generalities.
Fire Phoenix is saying Dark One is opposite of the creator, so he's the destroyer or the unmaker of things?
I'd be more inclined to say that. So I just wanted to end this with the Fael quote.
I don't know why I care for a man who worries so about his own safety, she murmured.
I feel like that should say so little. I feel like there's a missing word in that sentence.
It works grammatically, but it's awkward, kind of antiquated way of saying it.
That was my only question is...
Why do you worry so? But nobody talks like that anymore.
No. Why do you worry so much?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like or so little. But so he's going to confront Rand, the Dragon Reborn, after he may have just tried to kill him.
Yes.
So that's what she's saying is like, I don't know why I care about someone who's like willing to go like confront the most dangerous person in history after he may have just tried to kill us.
Yes, and I mean, there's also, I think, she's kind of chuckling to herself now, and she's being like tongue in cheek about it. But he also like tried to, in his mind, the way I saw this anyway, and she knows that in his mind he thinks he saved her by getting her out of the room, and because he thought that if he didn't, they could both have died.
Right.
Whereas without her there, if he failed, then at least only he dies.
Unless he puts the axe to the door and she's leaning against it, and he puts the axe through her head.
No, totally. But at at the end of this scene, anyway, she's like, I don't know why I care. I don't know why I care for a man who worries so about his own safety. Which is he's throughout this whole thing, he's concerned for everyone other than himself. He's not talking about himself at all.
No,
he's talking about what he must do for other people.
And I think that's also an important distinction with the relationship. Perrin cares about his duty. Fael cares about Perrin.
Yes.
And a lot of her frustration is like, stop treating yourself like something unimportant.
You're making more work for me.
Yeah. That's really, take care of yourself. Like, why, like, it's so hard to keep you alive. Stop it. You really don't need to turn yourself over to the White Cloaks. You really shouldn't. Like, fortunately, his family was all dead. I never thought I'd say that sentence.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. But no, I see where you're going.
But like, yeah, I mean, like that was sort of, if it wasn't, he would have turned himself over to the White Cloaks and everything would have gone south because he would have tried to save them.
He totally would have.
And so the fact that when he arrived, they were already all dead, there was no point in turning himself over. And he had to come up with another strategy, which involved arming the two rivers and uniting them.
I know. It's too bad everyone doesn't have a ton of hindsight. His parent could be like, "Hey, Rand, could I borrow like 150 of those Aiel you got?"
No kidding. Or more than...
Got a couple of things to take care of. Be right back.
Or more than two of the Ashaman.
Right?
Like, he does so
Come
much
on,
with
how about
only
like 10?
2 of them. Yeah.
You got so many.
Just give me a couple more.
Fate, yeah. I mean, even in the end with all those Trollocs, like, just having like a dozen of them would have been really helpful. But instead he's got 3. Is that correct?
I thought it was 2.
Bane, Chiad, Ruark?
Oh, Aiel?
Yeah.
I thought I was talking about
Oh,
Ashaman.
no.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just the 3 Aiel.
Yeah. 147 more would have come in handy, you know?
A couple of Dark Friend Warders. I mean...
Gaul. I always cross those two, Gaul and Ruark.
Oh, I don't. They're totally distinct to me.
Yeah. Ruark is Berlain, Rand storyline. Gaul is Fael, Perrin storyline.
Mm-hmm. And Ruark is...
To make a generalization.
Avienda's clan chief as well. Whereas Gaul is just a warrior. He's just a stonewalker. Ruark, clan chief. Ruark has 2 wives.
Stone Dog.
What'd I say? Stonewalker?
Yeah.
Too much Stoneline Archive. Although they do both end up with 2 women. Gaul ends up with Bane and Chiad, and Ruark is with Roof Mistress, and one is a wise one. Leanne and Amis. Thank you, Radio. There's
another one that's going to take getting used to. I said Amos for so long.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?